August 1945. The Pacific Ocean, east of Honshu. An American destroyer, the USS Blue, detects a radar contact that defies logic. It's too large to be a submarine, yet it sits too low in the water to be a destroyer. When the massive black hull finally breaches the surface, the American sailors line the rails in stunned silence. They are looking at a monster. It is 400 feet long. It displaces 6,500 tons. It is nearly 3 times the size of the standard American fleet submarines hunting in these waters. But it wasn't the size that terrified the intelligence officers who would later inspect her. It was the massive, watertight hangar tube welded to her deck. This wasn't just a ship designed to fire torpedoes. This was a mobile airbase, an underwater aircraft carrier capable of surfacing off the coast of California, New York, or Panama, launching 3 bombers and vanishing back into the depths before the first siren wailed. This is the I-400, the Sen-Toku class. It was Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's final gamble, a weapon designed to strangle the American economy and bring a superpower to its knees. And had the war lasted just a few weeks longer, it might have succeeded. Today, we are diving deep into the engineering marvel that was decades ahead of its time. We will uncover the desperate plan to destroy the Panama Canal, the technical secrets of the double hull design, and the reason why the United States Navy took this ship out to sea after the war and deliberately torpedoed it. To understand the I-400, we must understand the mind of its creator. Isoroku Yamamoto was the architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, but he was also a realist. He had spent years in the United States. He knew its industrial capacity. He famously warned that he could run wild for 6 months or a year, but after that, he had no confidence in Japan's ultimate victory. By 1942, that prophecy was coming true. Japan needed a way to bring the war to the American mainland, not just psychological raids, but strategic strikes that could cripple American logistics. Yamamoto needed a weapon that could traverse the entire globe without refueling. The Imperial Japanese Navy already had experience with submarine-launched aircraft. Their Type B-1 submarines carried a single small reconnaissance float plane in a hangar in front of the conning tower. But these were scouts, eyes for the fleet, essentially useless for combat. Yamamoto wanted a sword, not a spyglass. In January 1942, he proposed the Sen-Toku concept, short for Sensukan Toku, or Special Submarine. His specifications were insane by the standards of the day, a range of 37,500 nautical miles, enough to circle the Earth 1.5 times, the capacity to carry attack aircraft loaded with bombs or torpedoes, and the stealth to deliver them anywhere. The engineering challenge was immense. A submarine is essentially a pressure vessel. The most efficient shape to withstand deep-sea crushing pressure is a cylinder, but a single cylinder large enough to house a hangar and aircraft would make the draft too deep and the ship unstable. The Japanese engineers devised a radical solution, a double-pressure hull. Instead of one large tube, they welded 2 smaller cylinders by side, creating a cross-section that looked like a figure 8 or a pair of glasses. This gave the I-400 the beam, the width needed to support the massive aircraft hangar on top, while keeping the center of gravity low enough to prevent the ship from rolling over in heavy seas. It was a masterpiece of naval architecture, but constructing it required resources Japan was rapidly running out of. Originally, 18 of these monsters were ordered. As the war turned against Japan, that number was cut to 9, then 5.
Only 3 would ever be completed.
Let's look closer at the defining feature of the Sen-Toku, the hangar. This wasn't just a box bolted to the deck. It was a pressure-resistant cylinder, 102 feet long and 11 feet in diameter, slightly offset to the starboard side of the centerline. The door alone was an engineering hurdle. It had to be massive enough to let an aircraft pass through, yet seal perfectly against the pressure of a deep dive. A hydraulic ram forced the door open and shut, pressing it against a thick rubber gasket. One failed seal, one drop of seawater entering the hangar at depth, and the submarine would implode. Inside this tube sat 3 M6A1 Chiron bombers. But storing airplanes underwater created a unique problem: cold. At operational depths, the ocean temperature drops to near freezing. Cold engines don't start. Cold oil turns to sludge. To launch a surprise attack, the planes needed to be ready instantly. The solution was an elaborate heating system. The submarine's engineers piped hot oil from the ship's main diesel engines directly into the aircraft engines while they were stored. This kept the planes warm, lubricated, and ready to crank the moment they hit the surface. But the innovation didn't stop at the hangar. The I-400 was one of the first submarines in history to employ stealth technology. The Japanese coated the upper hull and the tower in a special rubberized compound made from gum and charcoal. This coating was designed to absorb sonar waves from American destroyers, reducing the acoustic signature of the massive vessel. It was the crude ancestor of the anechoic tiles found on modern nuclear submarines today. Japan knew they were building a giant target, so they tried to make it a ghost. A carrier is only as good as its aircraft. For the I-400, Aichi Aircraft Company designed a plane specifically for the mission, the M6A1 Chiron, or Mountain Haze. This was not a flimsy scout plane. It was a high-performance attack bomber capable of 295 miles per hour. To fit inside an 11-foot tube, the Chiron had to fold like origami. The wings rotated and folded back against the fuselage. The horizontal stabilizers on the tail folded down. Even the top of the vertical fin folded over. All of this had to be done by hydraulic systems or manual cranks within minutes. Launching a 9,000-pound bomber from a stationary submarine without a runway required brute force. The I-400 utilized a massive compressed air catapult, the Type 4, nearly 85 feet long. It ran along the forward deck like a scar. The drill was a race against time. The crew trained relentlessly to achieve a target time of 30 minutes to launch all 3 planes. Surfacing, opening the main door, winching the first plane out, unfolding the wings and tail, snapping the pontoons into place, or for a suicide mission, leaving them off to increase speed and bomb load. Once locked onto the catapult, a piston driven by high-pressure air would slam the aircraft forward, accelerating it from 0 to takeoff speed in less than 70 feet. It was a violent, deafening procedure, executed on a wet, rolling deck in the middle of the ocean. The pilots chosen for the Chiron squadron were the elite of the elite.
They weren't typical kamikaze, though they were prepared to die. They were highly skilled navigators and bombardiers, trained to fly low over the water at night, navigate by the stars, strike a pinpoint target, and then, miraculously, find their way back to a submarine dot in the vast Pacific. Or so the plan went.
By 1944, the target had been selected. It wasn't New York or Washington. It was the Panama Canal, specifically the Gatun locks on the Atlantic side. The strategic logic was sound. The United States was shifting massive amounts of men and material from the European theater to the Pacific to crush Japan. The canal was the artery that made this flow possible. Sever the artery, and the U.S. Navy would be forced to sail all the way around South America, adding weeks to their transit time and slowing the invasion of Japan. The plan was precise. The I-400 fleet, along with 2 other modified submarines, would approach the coast of Ecuador, launch 10 Seiran bombers in total. These planes, painted with fake U.S. markings to confuse defenders, would fly low across Colombia and strike the Gatun locks from the Caribbean side. If the torpedoes hit the lock gates, the water from Gatun Lake, the massive freshwater reservoir 85 feet above sea level, would rush out into the ocean. It would take Americans months, perhaps a year, to repair the locks and refill the lake. In that time, Japan hoped to fortify its defenses or negotiate a better peace. The Japanese were so committed to this plan that they built a full-scale wooden mock-up of the Gatun locks in Tateyama Bay to practice their torpedo runs. The pilots memorized every contour, every approach angle. They were ready. But history moves faster than engineering. By June 1945, as the I-400 was finally ready to deploy, Okinawa had fallen. The American fleet was already at Japan's doorstep. Cutting the supply line at Panama was no longer enough. The fire was already in the house. The Naval General Staff made a desperate pivot. The Panama mission was scrapped. The new target was Ulithi Atoll, a massive anchorage south of Japan where hundreds of American aircraft carriers and troop transports were gathering for the final invasion. Operation Arashi, or Storm, was launched. The I-400 and I-401 set sail, their hangars loaded with Seirans painted in silver to mimic American planes. The mission was a suicide run. Kamikaze attacks on the American carriers at Ulithi. They were en route, moving silently beneath the waves, when the radio operator picked up a broadcast on August 15, 1945. It was the voice of Emperor Hirohito. Japan had surrendered. Chaos erupted in the command center. Some officers wanted to launch the attack anyway. Others wanted to scuttle the ship and commit suicide. The captain of I-400, Captain Arizumi, made the hard choice. He ordered the mission aborted. To prevent the technology from falling into American hands, the crew performed a melancholy ritual. They catapulted the Seiran planes into the sea, unpiloted, their wings folded, sinking like stones. They fired their torpedoes uselessly into the deep. They burned the manuals and codes. On August 27th, the massive submarine surfaced and surrendered to the USS Blue. The Americans, who had boarded thinking they were capturing a standard submarine, were stunned as they walked the deck. It went on and on. They had captured a sea monster. The war was over, but a new one was beginning.
The I-400 was brought to Pearl Harbor for intense study. But the Soviet Union, now technically an ally but rapidly becoming a rival, demanded access. Under the terms of the surrender, they had a right to inspect captured Japanese technology. The U.S. Navy realized the danger immediately. The I-400's technology, specifically the range and the rapid launch capability, was a blueprint for a strategic missile submarine. If the Soviets got their hands on the double-hull design or the hangar mechanics, they could threaten the U.S. coast. The decision was made, cold, calculated, and final. Before the Soviets could arrive for their scheduled inspection, the U.S. Navy towed the I-400, I-401, and I-402 out to deep water off Oahu. On June 4, 1946, the submarine USS Trumpetfish fired 3 torpedoes. The Sen-Toku, the greatest engineering feat of the Imperial Navy, took the hits and slipped beneath the waves. When the Soviets arrived, the Americans simply shrugged. "We don't know where they are," they claimed. "Distress signals, lost at sea." It was the first cover-up of the Cold War. The I-400 lay undiscovered for decades until deep-sea explorers found its wreck in 2013. But its spirit lived on. American engineers studied the Sen-Toku closely. The concept of a submarine carrying strategic weapons to the enemy's coast evolved. Within a decade, the U.S. Navy launched the Regulus missile submarines. Then came Polaris. The nuclear deterrents that hide in the ocean today, the Ohio class, the Typhoon class, are the direct descendants of Yamamoto's desperate dream. The I-400 failed to save Japan. It failed to bomb Panama, but it succeeded in proving a terrifying concept, that the deadliest threat doesn't come from the sky above, but from the silent darkness below.